This happened a good few years ago. Some context. I was in my early 20s, single, and living by myself. Most of my family lived about a 4 hour drive away from me. I was working for a small call center that provided, among other things, phone services for a 24-hour plumbing company, so they needed someone on the lines at all times. My shift ran from 8 p.m. to whenever my boss showed up to pick up the line, which was usually 6 a.m. I worked in a building that housed several businesses of the same sort. Call center work mostly, though we were the only one that had 24-hour services. Because of budget cuts, I was always the only operator on my floor. The only people in the building at night were myself and the security guy who came by to do his rounds twice a night. Now, because the line had to be on 24/7, I was never allowed to disconnect while I was there. I ran to and from the bathroom, ate meals sitting in front of the computer, and every once in a while sneaked a cigarette at the window within sight of the screen. Only the light above my computer was on, everything else was turned off, and when everyone went away around 10 p.m., so I was left in this half darkness beneath a spotlight. I desperately needed that job to support myself, so despite the crap conditions, I kept repeating that it wasn't that bad. Things were usually quiet after 10 p.m. I could use the extra hours on my paycheck and didn't need to get a second job. I did a lot of reading and even considered going back to school because, if nothing else, the night shift would afford me plenty of time to study. So one night around 2 a.m. or so, I got a call. I introduced myself as I always did. Hello, you're calling so and so. My name is Jill. How may I help you? The guy on the other side repeated my name and hung up. Working phone services on the night shift, you get used to a lot of weird stuff, so I shrugged it off and went back to my book. Then he called again and asked if he was speaking to Jill. I said yes, repeated the company name, and asked, how may I help? He hangs up. The third time around, he asks, if this is Jill on the phone, and I ask to whom I'm speaking. He hangs up again. The next time he calls, he's breathing hard on the phone and tells me he wants me to talk to him, and he's not going to hurt me. I jot down his phone number, and I start hanging up whenever his call popped up, which was the better part of an hour. This went on for months. When he realized I was hanging up every time I saw that number, he began calling from a restricted number, meaning I never knew if it was a legit call and ended up answering. All the time, this guy keeps saying he wants me to talk to him and that he's not going to hurt me. The one time I counted, I hung up on this guy over 200 times in one night. Every time he would call, I'd say the company name, and as soon as I heard him, I hung up. I complained to my boss, and she did nothing. Instead, she laughed the whole thing off because this guy obviously didn't know where I was, and he was only a voice on the line, and I was perfectly safe. Sometime into this, I started talking to coworkers, and here's where it started getting really creepy. He never called on my days off, when someone else would be covering my shift. Indeed, at one point I changed shifts with a coworker to attend a wedding, and he didn't call that day. As time went by, I was getting pretty spooked by the whole situation and the fact my boss did zero to try and stop this. My coworkers were sympathetic and told me that if my boss did nothing, I should file a complaint myself, but I'm not sure I could since this wasn't happening on my personal number. None of them could really walk me home since I was the only operator in a night shift. Everyone else was gone by the time my boss arrived and I left the office. I got a little paranoid because obviously this guy knew my schedule pretty well, and even if I changed shifts, he would only call if he knew I was on the line. It had to be someone who could see me. I started doing commute with my cell phone in hand at all times, with the emergency number dialed in. Sometimes I did the whole commute on the phone with friends or relatives to keep calm. Since it's illegal to carry pepper spray here, at one point I considered walking around with a box cutter in my purse. That's how afraid I was. One day before my shift started, I was at the entrance of the building smoking a cigarette before going up, and I see the security guy come by. Same fellow who usually did the night shift, this huge guy. I didn't really know him, never spoke much to him, only said good evening or goodbye when I went by his desk and whenever he came to my floor to do his rounds. I usually kept to myself and I never really made small talk or anything. Just greeted him out of politeness and he greeted back. He asked for a light, so I gave him my lighter and he told me he'd been fired and he was going home. And he went on to tell me how he always got the impression I was afraid of him since I was never friendly or welcoming, exact words. Then he told me he was never going to hurt me and just walked away. I lost every drop of blood I had in me. I went inside to tell my boss the whole thing and discovered the guy got fired for harassing women in other floors, going as far as trying to corner someone in one of the elevators. The complaints piled up and he lost his job. Most of the time his shifts matched mine, so he would see me come in at 8 p.m. and left before I did. I asked my boss for that phone number again to come forward on this guy, asked the security company if that was his number. She told me she threw it away. When I told her the whole story, she found it cute. Exact word. Then she asked me if I was sure it was him, because a voice on the phone is different, and maybe you got it wrong. Quality assurance told us time and time again that our every call was recorded, so I demanded recordings. That's when I found out that, again, because of budget cuts and whatnot, the night shift was never recorded, so I had no evidence. Once the guy was fired, the calls stopped. I didn't work there for much longer after that. So yeah, I have this guy's face imprinted in my mind. Hope I never meet him again.